Hello and welcome to the Fatbush Guide to the Kor'kron Dark Shaman encounter 10-man normal in the Siege of Orgrimmar.
Hello!
And this encounter is fucking hectic towards the end.
It does get very, very messy. The thing is, even though it is just a one-phase fight, the boss gets more and more abilities. The bosses get more and more abilities at set health intervals. So towards the end of it, they have like a shit ton of abilities that none of them had at the beginning, and it does get ridiculously hectic.
So to start off with this encounter, you want to bring 2 tanks, 2 to 3 healers, ideally 3 because it's a bit of a pain towards the end, and mixed DPS. However, you don't want to stack too many melee. A lot of the boss mechanics force you to have ranged DPS, or at least it's a lot easier with ranged DPS. Now the fight consists of 2 bosses, Earthbreaker Horum and Wavebinder Cardress. Both these bosses do have a shared health pool, so the damage you do to one will also be damage you do to the other. Both bosses at the start of the encounter are also mounting 2 wolves, which is Darkfang and Bloodclaw. We'll talk about them later on in the video.
Now to start off, we're just going to talk about the mechanics of the fight and really how you need to deal with them. Now as the bosses lose health, they will start dropping totems, and now each totem that they drop will grant them 1 new ability each, and these totems can't be killed, so more they're like a visual representation to show that the boss has now got more moves. So at 85%, the Poison Mist totem will be dropped, and it will give Horum an ability called Toxic Mist.
Now Toxic Mist is just a debuff that infects 2 random players, dealing 80k ticket damage every 3 seconds for 30 seconds. You also get another debuff that increases the amount of damage you take from nature effects that also stacks. So you'll be taking even more damage from this debuff as the time goes on. And it does start to hit really, really hard, which kind of forces your healers to almost like spam heal that person. But yeah, not too much you can do about it. Just use personal cooldowns towards the end of the duration of the debuff. Otherwise, just bitch heal that person. Now Cardress will gain from the totem Toxic Storm. This will summon a storm on a random player, and it can actually affect tanks as well, that deals 300k damage per tick to anyone inside it. The storm will slowly move around for a minute before it eventually despawns. However, while these storms are up, they'll also spawn smaller tornadoes that deal similar damage but also will knock anyone up who ran into them. So it's really bad getting hit by these small ones. Just try to avoid them as much as you possibly can.
Now at 65%, the Foul Stream totem will be dropped, and it will give Horum Foul Stream. Now this will basically target a random player with a giant beam over their head that later explodes, and it creates a giant line of green shit between the player and the boss. Now anyone in this line takes 300k damage, and the player targeted cannot avoid this damage, but everyone else can. So really, you've got to think in your head, there's going to be a giant line between this player and the boss. Am I intercepting the line of sight sort of thing? So just make sure you're not in between those 2 lines, and of course if you have got this giant beam on top of you, make sure that you have positioned correctly so you're not like putting it all the way in the raid. So it's better for you to move than like your 8 other friends to move. So,
and Cardress will gain Foul Geyser. This is an ability that will target the tank that is currently being targeted by Cardress, so like the main threat target, and begin to channel avoidable projectiles at him. Now when these projectiles land, they're like little green blobs. When they land, they'll do 300k splash damage in a 3-yard area, and it will also spawn a foul slime. Now this will sort of happen around 8 times, so eventually you'll have 8 little foul slime ads. So while this channel is going on, this tank needs to like run about and just make sure that they do not get hit. Now one thing that kind of sucks is that the foul slimes, the actual little ads that spawn, have a 3-yard aura on them that ticks for 100k per second, meaning you can't tank these.
yeah, if you have 8 of them, that's like 800k damage per second you're taking, and even like with your biggest of boy cooldowns, that's still a lot of damage that you need to be able to soak up, so you cannot tank them at all.
Which means when these do spawn, DPS need to be incredibly shit hot at getting at them and killing them as quick as they possibly can. Obviously melee can't go near them. These ads can be stunned, they can be knocked back, so if they are coming close to you, use that form of CC to get them away from you.
Now at 50%, the Ash Flame totem, which is the last totem, is going to be introduced. Now this will grant Horum Ashen Wall. Now this will just summon a huge line of stationary like elemental mobs that will melee anyone who's nearby, and you cannot kill, tank, or you can't even target these mobs. They're just standing there, and they'll just slap you about if you go anywhere near these. Now it does spawn on Horum, so do try and like place Horum away for when this does happen. So just have like an eye on your DBM timers, and then just move him away. He drops the giant wall, bring him back so everyone can nuke him back down again.
One thing to note about this wall is that the mobs, they appear to be able to crit. So it's a bit RNG, like if you're forced to move through this wall because like you're in a really bad place, you need to like cross your fingers and hope that they don't crit, because we did have some people get one hit by this wall, by the melee hits, but there are opportunities. You can blink through it, you can use rocket jump sometimes, I tried a few times, but there are abilities that allow you to walk through. If you do have to go through it, do use a cooldown. Now from the totem, Cardris will gain Falling Ash. This will create some like ash in the sky, and 15 seconds later it will land and it will detonate, dealing 1 million damage to anyone inside this ginormous circle that you can see. However, if you're stood out of the circle, you'll only take 300k damage. So essentially, don't be inside the circle when it explodes, or you are definitely dead.
Unless you've got like the biggest cooldown in the world. Maybe like Dispersion or something, you might be able to sit for it, but you want to save that for when you have to cross those horrible mob walls. Exactly. You can't be wasting it on this. So yeah. You want to, when this does happen, do use like your small personal cooldowns to help out your healers and everything, but just make sure that you're not inside. That's like the worst thing in the world.
So they're all the abilities that the bosses will gain from the totems. And one thing to note about these abilities, once they've got them from the totem, they will keep them. Their abilities just stack. They get more and more abilities as the fight goes on. However, on top of all these totem abilities, the bosses also do certain abilities that the tanks need to worry about. Now, Harrim will apply a Frost Strike debuff, which deals 300k damage on application, and will also leave a debuff that increases the amount of damage you take from this ability by 25%. This ability does stack as well, so you need to taunt on around 5 stacks. This really fucking hurts, by the way, really fucking hurts. So you need to watch out for this.
Now, Cardis also has an ability that the tanks need to like worry about, and it will frequently cast something called Storm Bolt. Now, this will just deal 400k flat frost damage on the tank. There's nothing really you can do about it, but just be aware that he will be also slapping you with these. But really, you just need to really focus on Harrim and make sure that you taunt off each other. So if you do taunt Harrim, make sure the other tank does taunt Cardris off of you as well.
Because if you're tanking both at the same time, if you take a bolt and a strike at the same time,
that's a lot of damage.
You're going into one-hit territory, so you need to be very, very careful. Also to note about this fight, at 25%, the bosses will use Bloodlust. That increases the amount of damage they do and their haste, and the amount of tank damage that comes out is insane. So when the 25% mark does come in, tanks want to try and have as many cooldowns up, or at least the healers need to be ready as fuck, because it does hurt.
You probably want to pop Bloodlust yourself as well at that point.
Yeah.
Nuke them back down.
We didn't, we used it at the start.
Nice job.
But yeah, Bloodlust is probably best served right at the end of the fight. So that's all the abilities of the whole encounter. However, we're going to go right back to the start of the fight now, and we're going to talk about the wolves.
Now, both wolves have like very little health, and really you just want to kill them first. Just get them out of the way. They both have a very strong like stacking rend and deal a frontal cone cleave as well. So you got to make sure that you face them away. So of course you're not cleaving onto like the raid or the melee, and just make sure you do just kill them off very quickly. They're not a huge deal. Just make sure that you got your chain lightnings and your Balanized. I don't know what you're doing. Just make sure you do cleave them all down, and then the wolves are gone.
And you only have to deal with the bosses.
Yeah.
The tactic that you can see on the screen now is that we've got two groups. We've got a tank and a melee group that try and stay as close together as possible, and then a range and a healer group that tries to stay as close as possible. And the reason why we're doing this, the reason why we're stacked, is because of the boss's abilities like Toxic Storm. You can end up running out of room in the encounter area. You need to try and keep all the abilities squashed up in one area. Otherwise you will run out of room and you'll be forced to stand in shit and you will eventually wipe. So throughout the whole encounter, the raid tries to stay stacked, but tries to keep in range of the tanks for obvious reasons, so they can heal them or whatever. Every time a foul stream comes in, the player who is targeted by the foul stream is always moving to the left or the right hand side, and before it even comes in, we communicate go left or go right, and the raid will move in the opposite direction of that person. And we approach Toxic Storm more or less the same way. When it comes in, we all just move as one solid group. However, towards the 50% mark, where things are starting to go a little bit more crazy, this is when your whole tactic will probably fall to pieces. It's very, very difficult to stay as a group around the 50% mark, but you want to try and free up as much room just for this 50% mark, because once you hit the 25% mark, if you've got anyone dead, especially healers, then you're going to really, really struggle keeping the tanks up, because the bloodlust damage is so high. So what you want to do is just stay stacked as much as you possibly can and deal with the individual abilities without dying. And then when you hit the 50% mark, you need to kind of say, no one die now, do whatever the fuck you want, just keep the tanks up, don't do anything stupid, and just avoid the abilities. That's all you can really do, because you will just run out of room eventually, depending on how high your DPS is. So although it's a little bit vague, that's more or less the guide. It's not an easy encounter, I've got to say, it's not an easy encounter. The amount of abilities that you have to deal with that last 20% while the tanks are taking extreme amount of damage, it really is a mess. And we did wipe, in one particular group we did wipe about 5-6 times. But yeah, it's really excellent fight.
It is a good fight though, yeah, there's a lot to deal with, but like once you've done it, it's just like, good. And the environment in which you're in, like in the Orgrimmar main place as well, is super cool to have a fight in. So yeah, really good fight. So thank you guys for watching. If this guide did help you out, then please do give us a like, it helps us out significantly, and make sure to comment, rate and subscribe.
And if you'd like to see more 10-man normal guides by Fatboss in the Siege of Orgrimmar, then please do click up on the annotations you see on your screen now, and it'll take you straight to those videos.
Thanks for watching.
Thanks for watching.
Thank you.